Boom, broski. It is what it is. It was what it was, and it's going to be what it's going to be. Right? That's exactly what it is. It is what it is. It was what it was, and it's going to be what it's going to be. So, the thing about it is this, bro. Okay. Well, a couple of things. One is that they, for some reason, nobody is talking about the fact that nobody talks about the fact about, like the conspiracies that are connected to COVID-19 and Bill Gates and all of this, right? I had a clip on YouTube that got like 20,000 views where it was a clip of Bill Gates accidentally talking about population control, quote unquote. You go watch the video if you want to. People try to say that's not what it was. Yeah, okay. Anyways, what we do know about Bill Gates is that Bill Gates, he has been involved in some shady things for a while, right? He opens up a jar of mosquitoes that have malaria in them on stage, and no one says anything about it because he's Bill Gates and they don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to offend him because he looks like a supervillain who thinks that he can do whatever he wants, and because of his money, no one will ever ask questions about it. Bill Gates, who is super connected to the vaccines and super connected to COVID-19 and super connected to all of this crazy stuff and has been for a while. That Bill Gates, whose father, William Gates Sr., was in fact one of the founders of Planned Parenthood, 100% factual. It's not making it up. It's a real deal. You go Google it and search it out and find whatever you want to find about it. It's 100% facts. And he, one of the founders with Margaret Sanger, and we all know Margaret Sanger, right? Margaret Sanger, who wrote a book on eugenics and said she wanted to exterminate the black race. And then she was literally a white supremacist, literally a member of the KKK, literally has a picture of her on a porch with a bunch of other people holding up a sign that says "Women of the KKK," right? Literally did that. And also was called by Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton called Margaret Sanger one of her favorite role models and women alive that have ever existed. Because of course she did. Right. And we know that Planned Parenthood has a lot of shady things attached to that too, right? Like a lot of shady things as well. Like, and, I'm sure you've heard all the statistics, and, Candace Owens was really big on popping the lid off that in the very beginning. And we see that William Gates Sr., that's Bill Gates' father. You think Bill Gates came out of nowhere, but he didn't. William Gates Sr., Bill Gates' father, he was the founder, one of the founders of Planned Parenthood. He was on the board with Margaret Sanger of Planned Parenthood. You look it up, it's all true. And that's why a lot of people think that Bill Gates is into eugenics because of his father being into eugenics. And I remember when I started talking about that, they tried to kick me off of all the social media, and I said, no, it's true, it's an actual fact. And, they were like, no way, and then, they try to fact check. Bill Gates did not learn eugenics from his father, William Gates Sr. And and then they try to, they do that thing where they play the words and they try to make it sound like that the whole thing is a lie, that William Gates, they're hoping that you don't research deeper, and they'll be like, the whole thing's a lie. William Gates, they want you to automatically assume he was never on the board for Planned Parenthood. No. But if you dig deeper into it, you're like, oh, they didn't deny that William Gates Sr. was on the board for Planned Parenthood, that he did co-found it with Margaret Sanger, that that was Bill Gates' father. They don't deny that. They just deny that Planned Parenthood is for eugenics, and then that automatically means that Bill Gates obviously didn't learn it from his father. And then they try to twist it, and make it sound like William Gates connected to Planned Parenthood. I mean, what are you talking about? And they don't deny that Margaret Sanger was a white supremacist who wrote a book on eugenics, because that's all a fact. Anybody with a computer could figure that out pretty quickly. Bill Gates Sr., who's connected to a lot of weird stuff, right? And Bill Gates, who's connected to a lot of weird stuff. And then, on top of all that, where he talks about climate change and it's and we got to get rid and reverse it and blah, 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 and all this other stupid nonsense. And then now has recently done a 180 and completely came out and said, by the way, guys, I was completely wrong about this, and I have no idea whatsoever. And, there really isn't this problem with, climate change, and we just got to forget it and just don't worry about it. It's not really that big of a deal. That Bill Gates, come on now, that's a weird turnaround, and nobody says anything about it. Of course they don't, because it's Bill Gates. And factual information, all of it's factual. And we know there's a lot of weird things about Planned Parenthood, because James O'Keefe, when he was because he was the founder and CEO before they did a coup on Project Veritas, exposed the fact that Planned Parenthood was selling illegal baby parts on the black market. And so there's a whole lot of weird things connected to Planned Parenthood as well, right? And it runs through the Gates legacy, I guess you could call it, right? I mean, that's really what it is. And now this thing with climate change and everything and so many other things. So I have this clip where he was talking about population control accidentally, as that's what it appears to be. It appears to be that, right? And there's a lot of weird things connected to it. Now, I specifically remember that there was a specific conspiracy theory about Bill Gates that he was connected to vaccines that have, it's interesting how you say this, because it can sound kind of out there. But this interesting conspiracy theory that these vaccines had were connected to microchips, right? Not the idea that they would get the vaccine and then, eventually use it to introduce microchips, but the idea that the vaccine itself had microchips in it, and then that Bill Gates was using it with the 5G towers and all this. I'm sure you heard about it. It was all over social media for a while there. When I heard it, I was like, that's crazy. That's insane. I don't know why anybody would ever even believe that. That sounds completely ridiculous. And I'm sure everybody else did too, right? 90% of the population did. And I just completely threw that one away, so I'm not even going to listen to that. That sounds insane. And now, it's kind of like what Kieran the Light said, in a song where he said, they want me to get the vaccine, they can't mark me. And then he goes out of his way to say, everybody be so extra when I talk about the vaccine. I don't think that it's the mark, man. I just think that it's a test run and everybody's falling in line. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think too, right? I didn't when it first started. Well, I didn't believe COVID was real, and I've never taken a vaccine, and I never will. And I never wore a mask, and I never will. And I used to walk into Walmart without a mask, and everybody would be so mad at me, and they'd all hate me. They get all these looks on their face. They look like it was like an angry mob or something. It's kind of freaky. Like they were all wanting to kill you because how dare you not be afraid of this sickness, and how dare you not be afraid, and how dare you not get a vaccine and not wear a mask, and how dare you be a normal person and not really worry about a BS narrative that doesn't really exist, right? And that's really what it was like. And so, but I didn't think that, they were going to try to force people to take vaccines and that it would eventually lead to microchips. I didn't think that. I thought that it was a bunch of BS and it was stupid and it was kind of clowny and people were reacting to fear instead of what was actually going on. I did think that. And then I would hear people say, I remember I distinctively saw a social media post where this guy said during that time, like before COVID had even hit the United States, it was like right before that all happened. This guy went on there and he said, what it's going to be is that they're going to force people to wear a mask. And this is before anyone was wearing a mask. They're going to force people to wear a mask, and then what's going to happen is they're eventually going to pivot off that foot, and they're going to turn it into everybody's going to have to start taking a vaccine. And then after that, it's going to turn into microchips, and then that brings in the world digital currency. And I was like, what? What is this guy talking about? Like, I thought it was crazy. I really did. And that's not because I don't believe that there was some idea to create a new world currency or whatever. It's just because I get so used to every other new piece of technology that comes out being perpetuated as the mark of the beast and the Antichrist, that they were saying this all the way back when VHS is turned into CDs and DVDs, and and it's kind of wrong. And that's how you get the Amish, because it's stuff like that. Really, you follow that long enough, and you're going to wind up becoming an Amish, really. And so that's why I kind of thought it was ridiculous. Oh, just them once again trying to attach an entire narrative to the Antichrist, right? But then I witnessed in real time as that guy was deplatformed from social media, completely disappeared overnight, have no idea where he went, never saw him again, never saw the post or anyone like that ever again, never saw him again, have no idea where he went, totally disappeared. Canceled off of social media, right? Obviously, but and who knows what else, right? Whether he's alive or not anymore, I have no idea. Maybe he was killed. Maybe he's dead. Maybe the CIA killed him. Maybe the New World Order went to his house, found his computer, smashed all his things, took him away in the night, and murdered him. Or maybe he's like Edward Snowden and he's somewhere off sleeping somewhere because he warned the entire world literally detail for detail before it happened, and he was right about the entire thing. Because no matter how much they try to remove that from history or try to remove that from social media or whatever, or erase the fact that it ever existed, unfortunately, I have a memory, and I have like almost a photographic memory. Maybe, I don't know. Some people say that I do. Some people call it a photographic memory. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But I do know that I distinctively remember and have it ingrained in my brain that I, for 100% absolute certainty, saw this guy say the entire thing on social media, and it was totally burned into my brain. And it never went anywhere, and I still see the guy right now as we're talking, and I know exactly what it looks like, and, I see the sign he was holding up and, everything. And I've never seen it again. It never came back. Even after they tried to reverse like all the censorship issues with COVID and all these kinds of things, that guy specifically, that never came back. So, it's weird. It's an interesting thing, right? And anyways, I saw this happen in real time where it turns into masks, and then they're forcing people to take the masks, and I was like, that's kind of weird. That guy was right about that part. And then when I saw it evolve into vaccines, I was totally freaking out, because I'm like, this guy was 100% right, and now he's nowhere to be found, and they took him off social media, and we have no idea the truth. We have no idea what's going on, and we can't even barely get information out to each other. They're trying to destroy all communication between us. This is crazy. And then, of course, it pivoted into microchips. But I still thought the idea that the microchip being injected into people through the vaccine was a load of crock. And I'm still pretty sure under the impression that that is not what happened. Although I don't trust the vaccine at all. Never took it, don't, and never will take it. There's a lot of crazy things that happened with it, and people should be held accountable for that. And eventually there will be, especially Anthony Fauci and various others. Ha, the auto pen wasn't real, can't be pardoned. Ha, we're coming to get you. Don't worry, it's not over. We're coming to get you, my friend. Coming to get you. But I never thought that they put microchips in there. Now, and you would hear these things about 5G towers and all this kind of stuff. Now, interestingly enough, okay, I was presented by somebody that's on great, authority, right? Somebody that's full of integrity, that's, not strange and not way off in the goopah somewhere, coming up with all this kind of stuff. And they presented to me like this theory of why that is and why it's a thing and where it came from. And then I started to deep research, and they gave me everything, and I looked at all of it, and I was like, okay, this is really weird. It's really interesting, and the fact nobody's talking about this is really interesting as well, right? In fact, I actually, well, borderline short truth, and I'll go into this deeper in detail, is that when you actually trace everything, you see that there was a Harvard scientist by the name of Charles Lieber, and you can 100% Google this. This is all real. And he got the links, and I have the links, so we could show it. And, I'll probably even read the entire article word for word so that you could see. There was a Harvard scientist, and nobody seems to talk about it, right? It hardly ever hits mainstream news media. It's like here one day and gone the next. Very interesting. Named Charles Lieber, and he was known as one of the biggest institutes for nanotechnology that has ever existed on the face of the planet. Some people call him the father of nanotechnology. If you don't know what nanotechnology is, if you watch Teen Titans, if you ever saw Teen Titans and you saw the episode where Teen Titans and all them get injected with nanobots and it's in their DNA, and then Robin has to do whatever Slade tells him to, otherwise he'll kill his friends with this press of a button. Those are nanobots. That's what nanobots are. That's what that was based off of. Nanobots are these tiny little, robots. I'm not going to insult your intelligence and act like you don't know, but some people don't know. So they're like these tiny little nanobots that are like essentially they're computers. And the word nano just means really so microscopically tiny you can't even see them. And you get these, in theory, and really in reality, you get these thousands and hundreds of thousands and even millions of these little bots, and they all work together as one bot, like one robot through like artificial intelligence, but they're separated from each other so they can all, instead of being limited to like one big giant robot, that software is put into a million robots that are the size of like human cells, or and they want to get them smaller to like the size of atoms, and then you use those in correlation with each other, and they all communicate back and forth to each other and all this kind of stuff. That's essentially what nanotechnology is at its core base. Well, it's real. It's been created. It's a thing. They're microscopic robots, and they all work together in a tangent as one. Charles Lieber created this nanotechnology. Where do you get that information? Harvard.com, Harvard's official website, harvard.edu education website, and also harvardmagazine.com, which is their official magazine. And there's a whole article of them praising him, and he's the father of nanotechnology and all those kind of things. That guy also winds up, as the story goes, he winds up getting arrested by the federal government. This all happened. No one talks about it. He got arrested by the federal government because he was a Harvard professor for decades. All constantly pushed by Harvard, all over their magazines, all over their everything, He was arrested by the FBI along with two Chinese nationals who were later called Chinese spies, for espionage, and he was being paid $50,000 a month by the Chinese Communist Party to help spy on the United States of America. He was officially arrested and charged by the FBI and the DOJ. You can find all this information on doj.gov in arrest records. And both those Chinese nationals they got charged with espionage and like treason, and they caught them, all three of them, trying to escape the country and go to China, and they had 20 vials, okay? 20 vials of a substance that they were trying to sneak to China from biological laboratories. And this was also at the height, this was in like 2019, 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. All of this happens. Hardly ever hits the news once. They all get charged. Everything under the sun. Eventually, he's found guilty for that crime as well, right? And the father of nanotechnology, hanging out, Harvard professor that they call the father of nanotechnology, who has many patents, and you can find those patents on patents, googlepatents.com, where he patented the technology for nanotech and all these kinds of things, charged with espionage with 2 Chinese spies, communists, that were working at Harvard with him, paid $50,000 a month, was sneaking 20 vials from the United States to China with them. That's when he was arrested. And deeper into it, so that's the whole thing. And I will, show myself reading all the articles and put it all together so that you can hear it word for word and give you the link itself so that you could just click it and then see it for yourself so that you know that it's on there and it's real. Okay? Now, this guy, he also, get this, it's crazy stuff. That same exact guy also patented a piece of technology to be able to inject microchips and nanotechnology into people's human skin. I know that sounds crazy, right? It sounds made up, but the problem is that it's not. Like, this is all on googlepatents.com, and I'll give you the actual patent number and everything so you can look it up yourself, all the patent numbers and all the articles and all the information for who this guy is, doj.gov, showing the fact that he was arrested for exactly what I just said, and harvard.edu proving that he was an actual Harvard professor and that he was the father of nanotechnology, and harvardmagazine.com and all these websites, all these verifiable links, verifiable cited sources, as the left pretends that it cares about so deeply. And this guy patented the ability to shoot microchips and his nanotechnology into people's human skin. Interestingly enough, the patent was also created with like 6 other Chinese people are on the list. So it's like 6 Chinese spies. Everyone around this guy is Chinese, right? So we see nanotechnology, connection to China, arrested for sneaking vials at the height of COVID, and also patents the ability to inject through, and in the patent, you can read it. In the patent itself, it says through an instrument or a syringe. It actually goes out of its way to use the word syringe as one of the transferable methods for injecting this nanotechnology. So I find that really interesting. I find it really interesting that nobody talks about it at all whatsoever. It was not on CNN. It was not on MSNBC, of course. We already know this. I think maybe the story premiered on Fox News for one whole day or something like that. Like, he's just on there for a little while and then disappears in the thin blue air. Nobody talks about it. And except the Epic Times, they talk about it because, they don't lie and they're the only ones that tell the truth. And very, very, very various other people. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Really, really interesting. That's crazy. That's insane. And that's where that conspiracy theory about the vaccines having nanotechnology inside of them, that's where it originated. So what's interesting about that is that, and then around the same time, the FDA did approve, this is all verifiable, a patent for an electric pill, the first ever electric pill that they could give a patient. You swallow it, and the pill is attached to a sensor that lets them know whether or not you actually swallowed it. It was approved by the FDA, right? So microchips inside of the body, or technology inside of the body through medicine, is essentially what that is. And that's all verifiable as well. And so that's really where the origin of, and where it gets interesting, is that there's a few other patents, forget what they specifically say, you got to go back and look at it, that specifically have Bill Gates on there. And Bill Gates was actually making patents that coincide with the exact same thing. Actually, Bill Gates made a patent for cryptocurrency that is based off of human beings' biological data. So like their heart rate and their health and, all that biometrics can actually affect their cryptocurrency, whether it goes up or down. Really weird, right? Really interesting stuff. And that shows like a digital currency. And it was actually connected to like the nanotechnology of this Charles Lieber guy and so on and so forth. So it was all of that came up with that conspiracy theory where Bill Gates is injecting microchips into people through the vaccine. Now, whether or not that's true, or if that's like the opinion that people were led to because of a result of what they saw, I'm not perpetuating that I believe that the people that took a vaccine had microchips injected inside of them. That's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying. I don't believe that. I don't know that to be true. I haven't seen anything. I don't think there's been any studies that have proven anything like that. But I am saying that conspiracy theory was not completely taken out of thin air somewhere, like just circumnavigating in the back of someone's mind or something. They saw everything that I just told you and pieced it all together, and that was their idea of what that means. Now, if that ever comes out to be in the future that is actually what happened, right? If we actually get some sort of hardcore evidence that happened, well, then we know ahead of time that it was spoken about and it was said, right? Now, I'm not saying that will happen, right? Because people like to twist your words a lot. So I'm not saying that will happen, but what I am saying is that I just think that it's very interesting. I think that I am confused about the fact that I had no idea that this happened. And I'm not an uninformed individual. You understand? I am somebody that pays very heavily attention to what is going on in the world and what's happening all the time. And I am surrounded by people that are not that way. People that are extremely research oriented and pay attention to things that are happening in the world. And they all do their own research in areas while I do mine, and we all are sharing information with each other all the time, around the clock. So for someone like me, who's totally dialed in like way more than the average human being probably is, the average American at least, for me not to have any idea or any clue that something like that happened, and to learn that from somebody else years after the fact that it happened, I think is absolutely insanity. And it really is insane that nobody has any idea that this is a thing. They still don't know. Because if someone as informed as me doesn't know, then not that many people know, right? That's not a high percentage of the population that have any idea that took place, even though that is something that I would say 90% of the human population would be interested in knowing had they known that was an actual thing and an actual story. And they automatically assume to themselves that because it wasn't on, headline news or CNN or MSNBC or even Fox News or any of these places, that it's automatically a nothing, and there's nothing there, and don't even look at it, and blah, 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 blah. No. It's because you're the media, right? Like James O'Keefe says, like Elon Musk says with X, and like Tucker Carlson, right? You're the media now, And they're not going to talk about it on purpose. They're always going to not talk about it. And you have to literally go out of your way to make sure that it gets talked about, or it never will. That's the fact of the matter. So I just think that that's really interesting information. Everybody should know about it. And actually, I'm probably going to go and get all of the articles and the patent numbers and all of that, the details and the links and all of that, and read them out loud, word for word, and give the link so that it can't be, where's your cited sources? You're just coming up. Well, Harvard's official education website and their official magazine's website and the DOJ's official .government website. That's my cited sources. And the actual patents that are listed and can be looked up by anyone on the planet on Google's patent.com or any other place where they have a list of all the patents that have been filed and approved, right? Those are my cited sources. Actual cited sources. Can you believe it? That it's so real that even your far left cited sources registered and documented it as being an actual thing. Crazy. And that's why it's so insane that nobody knows about it and hasn't talked about it yet, even though it's cited sources. Right? So I'll go get that and read every single article and read all of it for the lazy people in the world. And also to prove that it's a real thing. And show the link for it so that, someone tries to come and say, debunked. It's been debunked. It's never happened before. No, actually, it has happened before. And your debunk is already debunked. Exactly that. So, and I'm not the only person that knows this, far from it. A lot of people do. But, it's like, it's just never talked about. It's pretty crazy. So if this doesn't get deplatformed or something, like if they don't kick this off of social media for saying all this because they're trying to control a narrative and say this is what happened when it didn't, blah, 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 then hopefully you'll see all of this and you'll go look it up and see for yourself that it is real, and then you'll tell as many people as possible so that people can be aware of what kind of playing field that they're dealing with when you're talking about these crazy things that are happening in the world today with people like Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Foundation and the Democratic Party and China and Fauci and the World Health Organization and the CDC and the NIH. By the way, I have a lot of cited sources from their websites as well, from NIH's National Institution for Health, or the NHI. All of those. I have the cited sources for every single one of them from their own places as well. So I guess I'll go do that now so that, you could have it all together as one and it doesn't just, where's the sources at, broski? Listen to this, broski. Here's a archive of Harvard scientist Charles Lieber, who is secretly working for the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this is really interesting. I'm going to read this to you real quick. And this is straight off the Department of Justice's .gov website, meaning it's an official government website. It's the Department of Justice's website, right? Because, people be like, well, what are you talking about? Where are you getting this? What do you mean by that, bro? That's all a conspiracy. Yeah, well, we got it from the DOJ.gov. I'll leave the links for you to see because you could go read it yourself. This was archived. Now, and I'll tell you why it matters real quick before I read it. Charles Lieber is a guy that has been connected to nanotechnology and using it. There's ideas of using it with coronaviruses. Okay, so let's look at this. This is the official press release. This was on Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, when this was released. Harvard University professor and 2 Chinese nationals charged in 3 separate China-related cases. Look at this, man. The Department of Justice announced today that the chair of Harvard University's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department and 2 Chinese nationals have been charged in connection with aiding the People's Republic of China. Dr. Charles Lieber, 60 years old, chair of the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology at Harvard University, was arrested this morning and charged by criminal complaint with 1 count of making a materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement. Lieber will appear this afternoon before Magistrate Judge Maureen B. Bowler in federal court in Boston, Massachusetts. Yang Wing-Ye, 29 years old, a Chinese national, was charged in an indictment today with 1 count each of visa fraud, making false statements, acting as an agent of a foreign government, and conspiracy. Ye is currently in China. Zhe Zhongzhang, 30 years old, a Chinese national, was arrested on December 10th, 2019 at Boston's Logan International Airport and charged by criminal complaint with attempting to smuggle 21 vials of biological research into China. What is that about, right? On January 21st, 2020, that's the day after the inauguration, Zhang was indicted on 1 count of smuggling goods from the United States and 1 count of making false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements, and has been detained since December 30th, 2019. So you can see it was Trump's DOJ that detained them, obviously, because, nobody else would have done it. Dr. Charles Lieber, according to court documents since 2008, Dr. Lieber, who has served as the principal investigator of the Lieber Research Group at Harvard University, which specialized in the area of nanoscience, has received more than $15 million in grant funding from the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH. I'm sure you've heard of them before, and the Department of Defense, the DoD. These grants require the disclosure of significant foreign financial conflicts of interest, including financial support from foreign governments or foreign entities. Unbeknownst to Harvard University, beginning in 2011, Lieber became a strategic scientist, quote unquote, at Wuhan University of Technology, the WUT, in China, and was a contractual participant in China's 1,000 Talents Plan from in or about 2012 to 2017. China's 1,000 Talents Plan is one of the most prominent Chinese talent recruit plans that are designed to attract, recruit, and cultivate high-level scientific talent in furtherance of China's scientific development, economic prosperity, and national security. These talent programs seek to lure Chinese overseas talent and foreign experts to bring their knowledge and experience and expertise to China and reward individuals for stealing proprietary information. Under the terms of Lieber's 3-year 1,000 Talents contract, the WUT paid Lieber $50,000 a month, US dollars, living expenses of up to $1 million of Chinese yuan, approximately 158,000 US dollars at the time, and awarded him with more than $1.5 million to establish a research lab at WUT. In return, Lieber was obligated to work for WUT not less than 9 months a year by declaring, quote unquote, declaring international cooperation projects, cultivating young leaders and PhD students, organizing international conferences, applying for patents, and publishing articles in the name of the Wuhan University for Technology. The complaint alleges that in 2018 and 19, Lieber lied about his involvement in the 1,000 Talents Plan and affiliation with WUT on or about April 24, 2018, in an interview with investigators. Lieber stated that he was never asked to participate in the 1,000 Talents program, but he, quote unquote, wasn't sure how China categorized him. In November 2018, NIH inquired of Harvard whether Lieber had failed to disclose his then suspected relationship with WUT and China's Thousand Talents plan. Lieber caused Harvard to falsely tell the NIH that Lieber had, quote unquote, no formal association with the WUT. After 2012, that WUT continued to falsely exaggerate his involvement with WUT in subsequent years, and that Lieber is not and has never been a participant in China Talents Plan. Quote unquote. Yang Ying, the Chinese national that was arrested with him, according to the indictment, is a lieutenant of the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, the Armed Forces of the People's Republic of China, and a member of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. On her J1 visa application, Ye falsely identified herself as a student and lied about her ongoing military service at the National University of Defense Technology, or the NUDT, a top military academy directed by the CCP. It is further alleged that while studying at Boston University's BU Department of Physics, Chemistry, and Biomedical Engineering from October 2017 to April 2019, Ye continued to work as a PLA lieutenant, completing numerous assignments from PLA officers, such as conducting research, assessing U.S. military websites, and sending U.S. documents and information to China. According to court documents on April 20, 2019, federal officers interviewed Ye at Boston's Logan International Airport. During the interview, it is alleged that Ye falsely claimed that she had minimal contact with two NUDT professors who were high-ranking PLA officers. However, a search of Ye's electronic devices demonstrated that at the direction of one NUDT professor who was a PLA colonel, Ye had accessed U.S. military websites, researched U.S. military projects, and compiled information for the PLA on two U.S. scientists with expertise in robotics and computer science. Furthermore, a review of a WeChat conversation revealed that Ye and the other PLA official from NUDT were collaborating on a research paper about a risk assessment model designed to decipher data from military applications. During the interview, Ye admitted that she held the rank of lieutenant in the PLA and admitted she was a member of the Chinese Communist Party. The second Chinese national, Zhezong Zhang, in August 2018, Zhang entered the United States on a G1 visa and conducted cancer cell research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston from September 4th to 2018 to December 9th, 2019. It is alleged that on December 9th, 2019, Zhang stole 21 vials of biological research and attempted to smuggle them out of the United States aboard a flight destined for China. Federal officers at Logan Airport discovered the vials hidden in a sock inside of one Zhang's bags and not properly packaged. It is alleged that initially Zhang lied to officers about the contents of this luggage, but later admitted he had stolen the vials from a lab at Beth Israel. Zhang stated that he intended to bring the vials of China to use them to conduct research in his own laboratory and publish the results under his own name. The charge of making false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements provides for a sentence of up to 5 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of $250,000. The charge of visa fraud provides for a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and its own fine of $250,000. The charge of acting as an agent of a foreign government provides for a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, 3 more years of supervised release, and another fine of $250,000. The charge of conspiracy provides for a sentence of up to 5 years in prison, another 3 years of supervised release, and another fine of $250,000. The charge of smuggling goods from the United States provides for a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of $250,000. Sentences are imposed by a federal district court judge based upon the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. So in other words, all combined, that would be, what? Around 30 to 40, 50 years max in prison and over $1 million in fines. Assistant Attorney General for National Security John C. Demers, United States Attorney Andrew E. Lelling, Special Agent in charge of the FBI Boston Field Division Joseph R. Bonavanalata, however you say his name, Michael Denning, Director of Field Operations, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Boston Field Office, Leah Alsatar Barsley, Special Agent in charge of the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, Northeast Field Office, Philip Coyne, Special Agent in charge of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Officer of Inspector General, and William Higgins, Special Agent in charge of the U.S. Department of Commerce, Office of Export Enforcement, Boston Field Office, made the announcement. Assistant U.S. Attorneys B. Stephanie Sigmund, Jason Casey, and Benjamin Talkoff of Lelling's National Security Unit are prosecuting these cases with the assistance of trial attorneys William Mackle and David Aaron at the National Security Division's Counterintelligence and Export Control Section. The details contained in the charging documents are allegations. The defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. These cases are part of the Department of Justice's China Initiative, which reflects the strategic priority of countering Chinese national security threats and reinforces the president's overall national security strategy. In addition to identifying and prosecuting those engaged in trade secret theft, hacking, and economic espionage, the initiative will increase efforts to protect our critical infrastructure against external threats including foreign direct investment, supply chain threats, and the foreign assets and agents seeking to influence the American public and policymakers without proper registration. That update came on February 6, 2025, which was earlier this year. So that, what I just read you, is straight off justice.gov, the Department of Justice's official government website. So it's not a conspiracy. The Harvard scientist Charles Lieber, crooked and corrupt to the core, also the guy that helped make nanotechnology and has a whole lot more to do with the 2020 pandemic than people realize. He was already connected to the pandemic because of patents that he filed and many other things. And this just further exemplifies the fact that he was in fact working with China and the Chinese Communist Party, sneaking vials of what? Speaking vials from American laboratories to Chinese laboratories, right at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Interesting. So, who is Charles Lieber? And why is he important? And who is this guy? And how come the mainstream news media has never talked about him? Why is he not a household name? Why do they refuse to talk about him and what he's done and what he's been arrested and convicted of with the Chinese Communist Party? Well, Charles Lieber, and people say, well, give me some cited sources, Joshua. I would like some cited sources so that I know that it's not a conspiracy. And really, it's just because they don't want to believe in anything that's true anyways. So they lie and say they want cited sources, even though they don't really want them. But we give them anyways and give the receipts anyways. And then they just pretend that they never saw it in the first place. So this is from harvardmagazine.com. Pretty cited, right? This is Harvard's official magazine. It's a magazine article in their magazine, also on their website. I'll give you the link. Right? Like the link we have about him being arrested from the Department of Justice.gov. Okay? So, let's see here. This was on Harvard Magazine, December 16, 2010. The title of this is Charles Lieber's Nanoscale Transistors Can Enter Cells Without Harming Them. Chemist Charles Lieber and his colleagues have developed a nanoscale transistor so small it can enter, probe, and communicate with cells without harming them. What a conspiracy, right? Imagine being able to signal an immune cell to generate antibodies that would fight bacteria or even cancer. That fictional possibility is now a step closer to reality with the development of biocompatible transistor the size of a virus. Heman professor of chemistry Charles Lieber and his colleagues used nanowires to create a transistor so small that it can be used to enter probe cells without disrupting the intercellular machinery. Crazy, right? Not making it up. These nanoscale semiconductor switches could even be used to enable two-way communication with individual cells. Lieber was forced for the past decade on the design, has worked on for the past decade on the design and synthesis of nanoscale parts that will enable him to build tiny electronic devices. You can see the Liquid Computing article from November through December 2001, page 20 on Harvard Magazine for more on that. Devising a biological interface in which a nanoscale device can actually communicate with a living organism has been an explicit goal from the beginning, but has proven tricky. At its simplest, the problem was inserting a transistor constructed on a flat plane, think of the surface of a computer chip, into a three-dimensional object. A cell perhaps 10 microns in size. Merely piercing the cell was not enough, because transistors need a source wire from which electrons flow and a drain wire through which they are discharged. The key, Lieber says, was figuring out how to introduce two 120-degree bends into a linear wire in order to create a V-shape or hairpin configuration. With the transistor near the tip, getting the entire structure off the surface on which it had been created was easier. Lieber integrated the nanowire probes with a pair of bimetal layered interconnects. Joined strips of two different metals that expand at different rates have been used in thermostats for years. When the temperature changes, one metal swells or contracts more than the other, bending the thermostat to the opposite side to accommodate the expansion. Lieber used the principle to lift the transistor up and out of the flat plane on which it was created. When he finally engineered the tiny device and tried to insert it into a cell, however, he had no luck. Pressing hard enough to disrupt the cell membrane, he reports, killed the cell pretty quickly. But when his team coated the hairpin nanowire with a fatty lipid layer, the same substance cell membranes are made of, the device was easily pulled into the cell via membrane fusion, a process related to the one cells used to engulf viruses and bacteria. This innovation is important, Lieber explains, because it indicates that when a man-made structure is as small as a virus or bacteria, it can behave the way biological structures do. Tests of the device indicate that it could be used not only to measure activity with neurons, heart cells, and muscle fibers, for example, but also to measure two distinct signals within a single cell simultaneously. Perhaps even the workings of interstellar organelles, the functional units within cells that generate energy, fold proteins, process sugars, and perform other critical functions. When those processes stop working, the breakdown can lead to diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, or Tay-Sachs. And because a transistor also allows the application of a voltage pulse, such devices might one day provide hybrid biological digital computation or deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's patients, or serve as an interface for a prosthetic that requires information processing at the point where it attaches to its owner. Digital electronics are so powerful that they dominate our daily lives, Lieber points out. When scaled down, the difference between digital and living systems blurs so that you have an opportunity to do things that sound like science fiction, things that people have only dreamed about. Quote, unquote. That was the article about Charles Lieber's nanotechnology. He basically created nanobots, which has been around for years. I don't know if you know this or not. I've always known this. I've known this for a while, ever since I was a kid. This technology has been around for years. Nanobots are these tiny little robots, essentially, that you can actually put, they're so small, you can put them into your DNA. You can put them into a needle and inject them into your DNA. That's not really new. That's been around for a long time. As you can see, this article is from 2010. It's from Harvard Magazine. But the point is, well, if you ever watched Teen Titans, I grew up watching Teen Titans, right? Teen Titans is what's up. Robin and Slade and Beast Boy and Cyborg and all of them. There's an episode on there, if you remember, right? If you're a millennial like me, or maybe a little younger, you probably remember the episode where Robin, maybe is that even the first episode of Teen Titans? I don't know. I don't remember. You go back and watch it. But you remember that Slade kidnapped Robin's whole team, right? And then Robin turns into Slade's apprentice, and you're like, why is he doing that? And then Slade presses this button, and all of a sudden his friends start to go, ah! And they start to act like they're dying and everything. Because when they got attacked, they injected them with these tiny little nanobots, nanoparticles. And you remember, Slade shows the screen on the TV, and he shows Robin that the nanobots are in their DNA and have attached themselves to their blood red cells. And if he presses a button, he could kill them from the inside out. And that's why he starts helping them until he gets all of them uninjected, right? You remember that episode. If you know Teen Titans and you're a real one and you know that episode, you know what it is. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that technology is real. What I just read you is the article that proves that it's real. That's what that is. It's that exact same thing. But interestingly enough, that guy that created this, Harvard scientist, Charles Lieber, he was recently arrested by the FBI and is being charged by the Department of Justice for espionage and working with the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, working with China, Wuhan, working with the people that created the China virus. Sounds crazy, right? No, it sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not, because I'll read you the entire article from the DOJ.gov's official website. He was arrested with 2 Chinese nationals for smuggling 21 vials from American laboratories to Chinese laboratories and was paid by the Chinese Communist Party $50,000 a month to spy on America and Harvard. Crazy enough. Crazy. Yeah, I know I'm taking you through this thing step by step, line by line, just so it doesn't get misinterpreted or misunderstood or misconstrued by anyone, because nobody would ever do that, right? Of course they would, because that's just the way that it works, right? So we're taking you through this thing step by step because I understand that it's so hard to believe. It's almost impossible to believe these things, right? Like, it's so hard to believe that, all of this is connected and all of this is true and all of this is real. Not like somewhere in a basement with lines stacked up in the back connecting images, but with like actual, right in front of your face, Harvard websites and the Department of Justice.gov. I know it's crazy. So here's another one. Charles Lieber, who I already introduced to you, who created the transistors for nanotechnology. That guy, he also, the guy that was arrested for spying on the American government with the Chinese Communist Party and being paid $50,000 a month to do it, that guy, along with 2 Chinese nationals, that guy, he also created, I get this, he didn't just create the transistors that were small enough to go into someone's human body, as we've already verified, but he also created nanotechnology that can mix with biological tissue. Just like I told you, Beast Boy and Cyborg. He created essentially a cyborg. Just like I told you on Teen Titans with Robin and Slade and the nanoparticles inside of them and they're screaming, "No!" That thing right there. He created that. See, here it is. This comes from the Harvard Gazelle. I'll show you the link. It's on news.harvard.edu, educational websites there. Official website, by the way, in case you didn't know. Merging the biological electronic. August 26, 2012 is when this article was released. Researchers grow cyborg tissues with embedded nanoelectronics. That's the name of the article. Harvard scientists have created a type of cyborg tissue for the first time by embedding a three-dimensional network of functional, biocompatible, nanoscale wires into engineered human tissues. Doesn't that sound amazing? As described in a paper published August 26th in the journal Nature Materials, a research team led by everybody's favorite Harvard scientist now, Charles M. Lieber, the Mark Hyman Jr. Professor of Chemistry at Harvard, and Daniel Cohane, a Harvard Medical School professor in the Department of Anesthesia at Children's Hospital Boston, developed a system for creating nanoscale scaffolds that can be seeded with cells that grow into tissue. The current methods we have for monitoring or interacting with living systems are limited, said Lieber. We can use electrodes to measure activity in cells or tissue, but that damages them. With this technology, for the first time, we can work at the same scale at the unit of biological system without interrupting it. Ultimately, this is about merging tissue with electronics in a way that it becomes difficult to determine where the tissue ends and the electronics begin. Direct quote. Contributing to the work were Robert Langer from the Koch Institute at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Zi Sang So, another Chinese person. Surprise, surprise. The Alan E. and Marilyn M. Puckett Professor of Mechanics and Materials at Harvard's School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. The research addresses a concern that has long been associated with work on bioengineered tissue. How to create systems capable of sensing chemical or electrical changes in the tissue after it has been grown and implanted. The system might also represent a solution to researchers' struggles in developing methods to directly stimulate engineered tissues and measure cellular reactions. In the body, the autonomic nervous system keeps track of pH, chemistry, oxygen, and other factors, and triggers responses as needed, Cohane said. We need to be able to mimic the kind of intrinsic feedback loops the body has evolved in order to maintain fine control at the cellular and tissue level. Using the autonomic nervous system as inspiration, Bozai Tian, a former doctoral student under Charles Lieber and a former postdoctoral fellow in the Cohane and Langer labs, joined with Harvard graduate student Jia Liu, another Asian. What is going on here? In Lieber's Harvard lab to build mesh-like networks of nanoscale silicone wires. Well, of course they did. The process of building the networks, Lieber said, is similar to that used to etch microchips. Obviously, that makes sense to me. That's exactly what I thought it would have been used for. Beginning with the two-dimensional substrate, researchers laid out a mesh of organic polymer around nanoscale wires, which serve as the critical sensing elements. Nanoscale electrodes, which connect the nanowire elements, were then built within the mesh to enable nanowire transistors to measure the activity in cells without damaging them. Once completed, the substrate was dissolved, leaving researchers with a net-like sponge or a mesh that can be folded or rolled into a host of three-dimensional shapes. Once complete, the networks were porous enough to allow the team to seed them with cells and encourage those cells to grow in 3D cultures. Crazy, right? Previous efforts to create bioengineered sensing networks have focused on two-dimensional layouts, where culture cells grow on top of electronic components, or on conformal layouts where probes are placed on tissue surfaces, said Tian. It is desirable to have an accurate picture of cellular behavior within a 3D structure of a tissue, and it is also important to have nanoscale probes to avoid disruption of either cellular or tissue architecture. Using heart and nerve cells, the team successfully engineered tissues containing embedded nanoscale networks without affecting the cell's viability or activity. Using the embedded devices, the researchers were then able to detect electrical signals generated by cells deep within the tissue and to measure changes in those signals in response to cardio or neurostimulating drugs. They were also able to construct bioengineered blood vessels and use the embedded technology to measure pH changes, as would be seen in response to inflammation, ischemia, and other biochemical or cellular environments, both inside and outside the vessels. Oops. Accidentally hit that thing, bro. Though a number of potential applications exist for the technology, the most near-term use, Lieber said, may come from the pharmaceutical industry, where researchers could use it to more precisely study how newly developed drugs act in three-dimensional tissues, rather than thin layers of cultured cells. The system might also one day be used to monitor changes inside the body and react accordingly, whether through electrical stimulation or the release of a drug. The study was supported by the National Institution of Health, NIH, and our friend Dr. Anthony Fauci, the McKnight Foundation, and the Children's Hospital in Boston. That's the official article from Harvard's official website that proves that not only did Charles Lieber create nanotechnology, small transistors that you could only see under a microscope that could actually go into the human body, but he also helped create a mixture of both tissue and electronics so that you can simultaneously, let's say, create a cyborg version of a blood cell, like a red blood cell or a white blood cell, kind of like on Teen Titans, or like you could in theory, inject it into a human being's DNA, and then it would become one with the human being's DNA without the human being even realizing it. Possibly even creating completely genetic altering codes. That's possible if you go deeper into it. Or, just from a surface level, regenerating blood cells, creating new nanotechnology. In other words, a human being could be walking around filled to the brim in their blood and their DNA with these tiny little miniature microbots, nanotechnology, millions of them, because they're as small as cells, without having any idea that they had them in their body in the first place. So that's really interesting, right? That's really intriguing, considering that Charles Lieber also was arrested by the FBI and is being charged by the DOJ for espionage with the Chinese Communist Party, where he was being paid $50,000 a month by them, and was arrested with 2 Chinese national spies who were both on trial for espionage and working for a foreign government, and were caught sneaking 21 vials from a United States laboratory to China right at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. All of that is a fact. People might not like to hear that. People might think that sounds, because they've floated around these conspiracies, right? That there's this conspiracy that what's really behind the COVID and the vaccines and all this. And I used to think to myself, it sounds a little crazy, right? A little wild. Not totally. Never bought into COVID-19. Never bought into the vaccines. Never got vaccinated. Never bought into any of that. I thought that was all a load of crap. But when you start talking about how there's something in the vaccines and all that, I don't know. I don't know about all that. Well, I didn't know about it at the time. Okay, I'll say it like this. I was always very suspicious of the COVID vaccines, which is why I never got them. And I could see something like, they're untested, or, some people even think that they put like poison in them. I mean, sure, maybe, I don't know. I could see it. Doesn't sound that crazy to me. But when people started talking about technology, I was like, that's kind of weird. It's kind of crazy. I don't know where people get this stuff from. But then I found Charles Lieber, who is a official Harvard scientist who created that technology. That's what he's known for in the entire Harvard and scientific world. He's actually called the father of nanotechnology. And he actually was arrested, and you can find that on the Department of Justice's website, was arrested by the FBI and is being tried for espionage and treason for sneaking 21 vials into China from America at the height of the COVID pandemic. That is crazy. But what's crazier is that that's all true, and that not one of those stories ever hit the mainstream news media ever at all. Do you think CNN talked about that? No, of course they didn't. Why didn't CNN talk about that? Do you think that Fake news CNN, the worst ratings ever. Maybe that's why. You ever think to yourself, maybe that's why they were called fake news CNN. Maybe that's why they only average 40 to 80,000 viewers per show when podcasts average 12 million viewers per show. Do you ever think that's the reason why? Because they don't talk about Charles Lieber. Official story. Did MSNBC talk about it? No. Did ABC talk about it? No. Did CBS talk about it? No. Did Fox News talk about it? Not that I remember. I don't think I ever heard Fox News talk about it. But Fox News is conservative now, so everybody loves Fox News. Are they? They fired Bill O'Reilly for expressing his opinion. Somebody that was on Fox News for years. And they fired him for expressing his opinion. And I get it. I understand some people might not like Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly's one of those people where, like half the time he's really annoying when he's talking about something and you're like, oh my God, what is he even saying? And the other half the time when he's right, it's hilarious to watch him laugh and make fun of other people because he's right. But the point is that Bill O'Reilly was on Fox News for decades, wasn't he? Decades, absolute decades. He was like the OG grandfather of Fox News. He's like the Bill Maher of MSNBC, right? And they fired him because he just said something that later turned out to be true. And they fired him. And then they put Judge Pyro on a 2-week hiatus. And all she did was say the truth. And then they replaced him with Tucker Carlson, and I thought to myself, oh my God, who's this idiot? When he first came on there, I really believed that. I saw his face, and it looked like a baby face, and I was thinking to myself, who is this baby-faced idiot that they replaced him? He's going to be a company boy, otherwise they would have never put him on there in the first place to replace Bill O'Reilly. They're going to go get someone that does exactly what they want him to. And then I was proven wrong. After like 6 months or a year, however amount of time, I kept watching, I kept listening to him, and I'm like, no, this guy's right. This guy's spot on about stuff. And then he became the massive Tucker Carlson that we all know, and he's grown even bigger than Bill O'Reilly. And then I was like, wow, that's hilarious. Fox News replaced Bill O'Reilly with this guy, and Tucker's just another Bill O'Reilly, except even bigger. And then what did they do with him? Oh yeah, they fired him. They fired him. And then they replaced him with Jesse Waters. And I thought to myself the same thing. Oh yeah, just another company guy. But actually I've been watching Jesse Waters here recently, and Jesse Waters is pretty good. He's pretty spot on. So Jesse, you'll be fired soon, by the way, if you don't know. If you keep going the direction you're going. If you turn into another Bill O'Reilly or another Tucker Carlson, I don't know, there's got to be something on that stream of line shows right there, right? There's like something in the visible stream in the spiritual realm or something. There you go from Bill O'Reilly and his replacements, Tucker Carlson and his replacement. What is this generational thing right here? Jesse Waters. If you continue to go down that road and be uncompromised, which he has been so far from what I've seen, eventually they will fire you. You know that, right? And then you have, so Fox News, whatever you want to call it. And then the people that used to own MSNBC bought Fox News. They bought Fox News out. Does that ever hit the mainstream news? Of course it does not, because they're the ones that own the mainstream news media. Duh! And then you have... And then that's why some people call it Fox News, F-A-U-X, news, faux news, yeah? So I don't really like them either. And then, you know how it is. But the point is, have any of them ever talked about Charles Lieber? No, of course not. Even though this is all verifiable facts. Even though I showed you the Department of Justice's .gov website that proves that the arrests happen, he's being charged. Even though I showed you Harvard Magazine's official website, and now here's Harvard Gazelle's official .education website. This is all facts. These are all facts. Now, maybe one day the news media will decide to talk about the facts and not a bunch of stupid, radicalized, anti-factual opinions. By the way, the reason that people are also floating all this around to the possibility of injecting these devices into the human skin, whether or not that was done or not, I don't know. I don't have any idea. I'm not here to say that happened or not. I don't know. Don't have a clue. But I'm explaining to you why people think the way that they do and why those stories came out. And maybe they weren't just a bunch of loons who were pulling stuff out of thin air, but they actually had some sort of factual evidence from news stories that were just never talked about by the mainstream news media, and therefore it was very easy to call them crazy, sweep them under the rug, and act like they were just pulling things out of their mind off of a schizophrenic LSD acid trip, instead of actual verifiable facts from Harvard's website. Okay, so let's look here. Here's another thing. This is a U.S. patent that was patented. Okay, and I'll give you the name of it. Oh, really? A U.S. patent? Yeah, it's W0201519978482. That's the name of the patent, by the way, because it's a real patent. Okay, you could go on patents.com, right? Patents.google.com, and you can search that number, and the same exact patent will pop right up on your screen for you to see. Wow. Now, what is that patent? Well, I'll slow it down for you. Don't worry, I'll slow it down for you. The name of that patent, the title for that patent, was Systems and Methods for Injectable Devices. That's the name of the patent. That's not what I said it says. That's the name of the patent. Systems and Methods for Injectable Devices. The inventor, and you can see all this on the website, Charles M. Lieber, the same Harvard scientist. And who else is with him? Well, let's look at some of these names, shall we? Jia Lu, Chinese. Zhenzo Zheng Cheng, Chinese. Gu Song Hong, Chinese. Tianming Fu, Chinese. And Tao Zhu, Chinese. Those are all real names, not making them up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Chinese people that helped find the patent with Charles M. Lieber, disgraced and arrested by the FBI for taking $50,000 from the Chinese Communist Party a month. By the way, $15 million in total. Helped find the patent titled Systems and Methods for Injectable Devices. The number for that patent, which you can just go ahead and Google it and it'll pop up on your screen. I'll give you the link too, because some people are lazy and they don't feel like typing out a patent number. It would be the letter W, the letter O, the number 2, the number 0, the number 1, the number 5, the number 1, the number 9, the number 9, the number 7, the number 8, the number 4, the letter A, the number 2. There, did I go slow enough that time? Because, you know, they act like it's fake. It just spout out random numbers from the top of his head. It's not a real patent. Now, here's the beautiful thing about that, right? Look, I'm going to read to you. This is right off of patents.google.com, by the way, which keeps a registry of all the patents that have ever been patented by anybody in the history of ever. And this is what they say about it, right? The abstract of it. The present invention generally relates to nanoscale wires and/or injectable devices. In some embodiments, the present invention is directed to electronic devices that can be injected or inserted into soft matter. That's an exact quote. That's their words, not mine. Such as biological tissue or polymeric matrices. For example, the device may be passed through a syringe or a needle. That's their words, not mine. In some cases, the device may comprise one or more nanoscale wires. Other components, such as fluids or cells, may also be injected or inserted. In addition, in some cases, the device, after insertion or injection, may be connected to an external electrical circuit. An example, to a computer. Other embodiments are generally directed to systems and methods of making, using, or promoting such devices, kits involving such devices, and the like. End quote. That's the definition of that patent from the official patents. The classification of it is A61N105, or electrodes for implantation or insertion into the body. Okay? Now, let me break down what that patent means, right? So, why are the two words? This is how you understand patents, okay? The patent numbers and letters are divided because they mean classification. So, like this patent itself starts with the word WO, right? That means that it's a worldwide patent. That's what that means. Some patents begin with US because they're United States patents. This patent is WO, meaning worldwide application. Means everywhere in the entire world, Charles Lieber and his Chinese friends are the only people that have the right to inject technology, computers, inside of someone's bloodstream through a syringe or needle. Now, isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting? I mean, you could call it conspiracy all you want to, I guess. But the problem is that this is a real patent. That's the problem. The problem is that anyone can find this patent on the internet with a 5-minute Google search. Now, the interesting thing is, why Charles Lieber and his 5 Chinese friends also created transistors and also created biological cells that can become one with transistors, and why they were also arrested for espionage and working with the Chinese Communist Party in the height of the pandemic in 2020. Why did the 2 Chinese nationals that worked with Charles Lieber worked at the Wuhan Technology University? What are the odds? Charles Lieber, a part of that little $50,000 a month kick that he was getting from the Chinese Communist Party, was also in his contract said that he would work with the Wuhan University of Technology, the WUT. Isn't that crazy? That's insane is what it is. Have you ever heard of it before? No, probably not. Probably not. Why? Because CNN doesn't talk about it. Because the mainstream news media never talks about it. Now, why is that? Well, I mean, we all know the answer, really, because they're all a bunch of Chinese communists. That's why.